Julian exposes Rory and Maul and provides receipts about the behind-the-scenes drama that tore them apart.
Rory, like, you're fumbling through a BetterHelp script when it's clear your therapy is just about as effective as Maul's diet. At one point, I was the person that Rory in particular felt comfortable confiding in with his fractured relationships with everybody on our team. And then at some point, in walks Maul. Here comes the elevator doors swing open. Maul walks in 2 hours later as if nothing happened. And when I started on this show, I had spent so much time committing to a company, committing to guys that weren't ever really committed to the company or the work at hand themselves.
All right, everybody. So Julian said he's going to take the high road until now. He started his last episode by saying he's avoided talking about them, focusing on self-reflection and growth. But after the recent jabs that Rory and Maul took on their Patreon here...
You ever meet somebody that like brags about shit they supposed to do? Like, nah, no. You don't get like credit for doing what you was hired for. This is what you get paid for, to do this. Why are you throwing this in my face like you did something that you weren't asked to do?
Julian is breaking his silence and breaking them down. Now, Julian first starts off by addressing the praise narrative and takes issue with Rory and Maul's claim that he constantly needed praise to feel valued. He argues that he communicated his concerns, but they were largely ignored. Now, what Julian's talking about is emails that he outlined and constant communication that they weren't professional. Like, they usually, when you send an email at your job, people respond and then some type of arbitration or some type of agreement occurs. Then Julian comes with his first savage shot and says Rory's therapy is as effective as Maul's diet. Jeez Louise, he went for the fences. And I think he really got at Rory in this video more so than Maul, because Maul was always thought to be somebody who was unprofessional. Like, everybody knows that. But in this video, he's trying to construct the image of Rory as somebody who may be two-faced, somebody who plays lip service to being a guy of high value, but maybe isn't necessarily the case when you look at his actions. So Rory's good guy image was thrown out the window. He accuses him of always playing the good guy, even when he's the source of a lot of conflict, revealing that Rory even admitted to him that he had fractured relationships within his own podcast and the wider industry. So yeah, that means that Rory was talking to Julian about how things weren't working with not just him, but also probably someone like Damaris, probably other people at the show, Rel, Yomi, other folks. So there seems to be a lot of tension, and Julian started to expose that. Now, he also hit on the unprofessional behavior behind the scenes, detailing how much Maul regularly showed up late, even noting that there was a few times when he would arrive to the show 2 hours late, and even says that Damaris, his former colleague, can vouch for the lack of professionalism. Now, like I said before, this is obvious. This is something that Rory himself has said about Maul. Also, none other than Joe Budden would call out Maul on the Joe Budden podcast for all the times he would arrive late to the show. And I can't imagine that's something that's pleasant for this podcast to go through. You know, when you're trying to do something, when you're trying to make content, when you're trying to do anything, you expect a certain level of professionalism, and instead it looks like Maul is being a diva. But then again, he is the boss, so maybe he feels like he can call the shots. But let me know what you think in the comments. Is Maul being unprofessional, or is Julian being a big baby? Then Julian drops another major bomb and says that Rory and Maul botched his hiring by not telling Damaris that he would be absorbing some of her responsibilities. Now, this is something that he outlined in my interview with him about 1.5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, the transition, it wasn't handled. It was mismanaged entirely. There was no conversation between Damaris and I. There was no, sit down or like change of power or like, here's the new structure, here how it's going to. It was just like, here's Julian, he's in your chair now. You should properly introduce them and explain to everyone what their role is. And even more so, if someone's retroactively taking someone else's spot, you should probably communicate to the person who is, not losing their job, but, their job's being altered.
But the bigger bombshell is that when Julian arrived, Damaris's pay would be cut.
Basically, I was doing social media at the time. She was the producer. They were severely under-delivering to SiriusXM, like less than half of what they were supposed to be doing, numbers-wise. So in I come from just socials to now producing as well. One day, Rory asked me to come over to record, and I just sat in Damaris's seat. And not only did they do that, but they cut Damaris's pay as well.
I didn't know that. I thought maybe they would keep the same pay or maybe just give Julian a higher salary. I didn't know they were like, hey, man, we're paying you this much, but we're taking away some responsibilities, giving it to Julian and paying him more. Now, this, unsurprisingly, created tension between Julian and Damaris from the jump, but they would eventually become friends and bond over their issues with Rory and Maul and kind of become cool. So much so that Julian now says he's really close to Damaris now, even though he was fired from the show. Then Julian gives lip service to the money issue. Julian says he emailed Rory and Maul in February 2024 after becoming more of an on-air personality, but didn't hear back about that until August. The delay, he says, made him feel inadequate and felt like a slap in the face. He also reminds listeners that his moments on the show were really big. The viral backpack story.
In my peripheral, I see them, and I see her holding hands with someone, and they're walking to my apartment door. The light from my apartment illuminates both of them. I see it's not a woman, it's in fact a man. I lent her a backpack for the day. He's wearing my backpack.
And also his idea for the bare minimum merch, which he said made so much money that it funded their studio. And also, there was the something wrong with the you know what moment, which he says is one of the viral or maybe the most viral moment for the show. Lastly, Julian talks about how when the Rory and Maul podcast went on tour, he flew on his own dime and he ended up working the event.
I wasn't the person that flew myself out to London, waited. I flew myself out to not work. I just wanted to be there and experience that because I'd never been to London. And then the day of the show, Benner got too f***ing drunk because the person that's paid to be there, the person that flew first class to be there, the person that you pay a managerial cut for is across the street just, blacking out and smoking and chain smoking cigarettes.
And was never compensated. Julian says this kind of added insult to injury, but I mean, he flew on his own dime. I don't know what he expected. And then Julian anticipates how Rory and Maul will respond to him. And he jokes saying that Maul will be late and just call him the F word and takes a subtle dig at Maul's alleged immaturity and toxic humor. He also says Maul routinely skips production meetings and that neither of them will respond directly because they prefer sneak disses and coded shots. So there you have it. Julian expected compensation, but he didn't set clear boundaries. I mean, if you expect more compensation and you do stuff for free, you got to predict, not everybody's really gonna give you more money. This is something that I think everybody who has a podcast deals with, is that they start to take on more responsibilities. And it isn't only particular to podcasts. There's some people at jobs right now, they're doing stuff that isn't included in their job description. One, because they're expecting to get paid, or two, they don't want to get fired. If you don't do it, that might make you lose favor in the workplace and you might get kicked out of the job that you have. Also, once again, another key takeaway was Maul's diva behavior, lateness, and disregard for structure. It finally surfaced, but I think we all knew that. I don't know if it finally surfaced. I think Maul is, he's a vibe guy, not necessarily a professional guy. And also, Damaris's tension with Maul and the pod crew seems very real and has been bubbling for a while. It comes across all the time, especially Maul and Damaris. So keep an eye on that. We will see how they respond, and we will take it from there. I think Rory and Maul won't address it at all, like Julian anticipated. I think they might address it months from now and might even comment on how Julian's numbers are down or something like that. But they don't want to get into a back and forth, but we will see. Bottom line, Julian exposed more than just pettiness. He exposed what looks like long-standing dysfunction and ego mismanagement behind Rory and Maul's cool guy brand. Let me know what you think in the comments. What do you feel about Julian's shots? And it's important to remember that Julian was responding to comments that Rory and Maul made on their Patreon So it's not necessarily like he's doing this out of nowhere, but we'll see. There goes the story of another sad podcast breakup. With that said, follow me on Instagram to Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter to Stop TV. Follow me on Patreon. I just dropped content where I had to sit down with Rocky Thunder. Then I had to sit down with Furious Robinson, and we discussed things about the podcast industry and just what it's like for small creators to navigate, a channel and all of the challenges that exist behind the scenes. All right, y'all. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.